in that university from, I think 2015, I started doing it. So today, DevOps, OWASP security, emerging information technology, and my name, Valentine Wats, or Waturuocha there. So we're going to we'll dive into cloud computing, software stacks, virtualization, containerization, OWASP, emerging information technology trends, etc. Now, we'll dive into these things, and I understand, obviously, you have quite capable lecturers, and a lot of the technology here you've probably been taught already. So I am going to take a stance of going into these things in a manner that you already know some of these things, but a little bit into detail, but then focusing much more on the area of how the supply and also, excuse me, and also the different areas, different categories within this industry. When I hear people say, oh, we're going to go into cybersecurity, as if that's the only area, there's quite a lot of areas here, and all of them requiring resources and requiring that we develop people, and that people go into these areas as well. So the content and structure of this today. So the lecture, intended learning outcomes, structure. I'll introduce myself, my career, as a prelude to career path discussion. Now, I'm going to go into detail in my career, and the reason is that I want to use that as an example to show you some of the things I had to do. And I know it's been a long time. The industry has changed quite a bit, but I want to use it as a way of showing you as well what I had to do, and hopefully maybe something, because in the end, this is all about getting a career in the field, going into the field and doing your best, adding the value and getting paid handsomely for it as well. And how I started my career, also a prelude to a career path discussion, as I mentioned. What is DevOps? The history, emergence of it, why it emerged, and DevOps tool sets. I mean, things you already know, but then let's trace where it's come from. I mean, why was there even a need for this in the first place? There is a reason for it, and I'm privileged to have been around. I started in this industry at a time before the word DevOps was coined. So we will evaluate that. We'll go through that and see if we can learn something from that as well. We'll talk about the cloud providers, AWS, Amazon Web Services, Azure, containerization, Lambda serverless, software stacks, a slight deep dive, again, commercial use. I would go into a little bit of detail as I'm allowed to, because obviously there's quite a confidentiality around Australia Public Service Australia. So that would be your ATA, your MyGov, and Centrelink, those kind of places who look after the infrastructure and what they've done with some of these technology as well. We'll go to a little bit into detail about that. Obviously, we'll talk about OWASP, which is a huge area, certainly for myself, my company. Xlite is a product that we've built that is a data security product that protects as a last line of defense. A lot of OWASP governance and framework has been wrapped around Xlite, and I'll go into a little bit detail. It's the only example I could think of, so that's why we put it in there, and we'll use that to illustrate some of the points that we've made. Emerging technology trends as well, information technology trends, especially because I also want to use that to say, well, there's so many areas, we can't all have only cybersecurity engineers or only DevOps engineers. There's so many areas, there's huge amount of areas that as the world advances in a digital manner, there's so many areas that need to be covered. We need resources, we need skills, we need people expertise in these areas for the world to continue and even be better than it is today. After that, we'll go to questions and related discussions. I mean, if you're really stuck, please write down the question. But if you really have to, by all means, raise your hand and ask me. I would stop. But if you can, wait till the end of it and then ask me whatever questions. I'm leaving 30-40 minutes, and hopefully up to 30-40 minutes for discussions, questions, which I think would help, because I want to hear what you want to ask, and I'll tell you what I know. Obviously, I don't know everything, but based on some experience I've had, maybe some idea of giving an answer or pointing in a direction where you can get an answer from. So this lecture will focus more on business use cases, success or failure stories, to provide some more understanding of this concept, in addition to what you already taught or what can be gleaned from the internet or your textbook. So already have that knowledge. I'm going to go into more of the use cases where I can to explain that as well. Good. Anybody feel like anything from anyone? I'll assume no, so I'll carry on then. Yep. Okay, cool. So I have a master's degree in information system and technology from City University in London. Started my career in London. I also went to Harvard. And I think my quest to Harvard was to try and understand IT as enabling business. That quest to understand it a little bit more. So I now got the IT knowledge, and I wanted to understand, well, how do we use it? How much use can we use of it in business? And that's what led me to Harvard. In Harvard, we studied some of the best companies in the world. What they've done, it was a mini MBA, one of these executive week-long programs, we learned about Toyota, what Toyota was doing. Obviously, Toyota, for quite a number of years, till date, still remains one of the most efficiently, cost-effectively built cars in the world in the way that I went about it. Some of the thinking, the Kanban methodology they use, and just-in-time type of methodology that they used, which I'm happy to go into more questions on that if we need to go into a bit more of that one. So that's what we learned. McDonald's as well as one of them, a big one. So it was a very enlightening for me as well. I was elected a member of the British Computer Society in 2006 in the UK, and I chartered, I think, a year later. I'm also a member of the Forbes Technology Council, which means I get to write and I get to share my opinion about certain areas. I mean, recently written one on quantum computing, recently written one on cybersecurity, I think doing something on artificial intelligence. So I write for the Forbes Technology Council as a contributor. I've been responsible for delivering or been involved as a senior in delivering a combined project value of over 400 million in the last 15 years. So my background has cut across consulting, consulting probably for over 20 years, but given over 20 years, and then product building as well from start to finish. So a consulting firm turned into a product development firm, which is what some of the things that we've done. I've operated at senior management level in several multinational companies here in Australia: IG Insurance, PwC, Coates Hire, Gold Coast City Council, and Suncorp Bank. I've worked directly and indirectly with Amazon. We did quite a bit of work with Amazon in integrating one of our products into the ECS container service. ECS is called, if I remember well. Yes, ECS container service, and with Google and with IBM as well. I had partnership with IBM at one point as well to embed one of our products some years ago into their ecosystem and sell it from there as well. I get invited to some of the events in Las Vegas, quite rockstar type events, quite interesting. It was something new to me for the first time I went to it. Anyway, I initiated and led the development and product launch of 3 innovative and disruptive products. Omnium Lite, which is actually a DevOps tool, which focuses on test environment management, which we'll get into a bit more detail later on. PMP Planner, a project management tool set that captures tasks, milestones, and displays budget burn rate in an instant. You will not believe that there are very few tools out there that actually can give you budget burn rate in a project that you're managing. So there are very few project management tools that can actually give you a burn rate. Okay, log in and say, how much am I spending on my project, which is a very important key piece of information a program owner, a project owner, a project sponsor needs to have. You'd be surprised that there are not a lot of tools that give you that. You will have to look at it in different tools. So that's what we try to achieve there. We built the original, which is called PIMDesk, for a large oil and gas services company in Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. They have a user base of I think about 15,000 user base, and that's what we just launched that. So it's a derivative of that product. PIMDesk is PMP Planner, so that was built for initiated and built, but we own the IP for it. And Xlite as well is a product that we're launching in the Silicon Valley in a few weeks' time, and it secures the data 100% from cyber theft. So this is some of the work we've been doing for the past couple of years as well. I've been privileged to advise, influence country presidents, certainly in that other parts of the world, ministers here. I'm helping to define policy for the opposition party. I met up with the Shadow Minister for Cybersecurity a few months ago to help with some ideas on some of the issues, some of the challenges we're having, some of the cyber attacks we're having, and some of the detail, more of the detail type things that can be done to impede some of those attacks, and members of parliament on digital policy as well. So I'm involved in some of that work, both formally and informally at the moment as well. I'm also privileged to have mentored globally the careers of about 15 graduate and postgraduate students, to include quite a few from Griffith and QUT universities and other parts of the world as well. So that was where I was. How did I start my career? And it's important I take you through this journey because, like I said, the reason why, again, I'm trying to give ideas here. I wonder, the idea was to make this in such a manner that listening to it, you would target questions at me that would help you to make decisions in your own career and how you go about choosing where to go to or what you need or where you want to get to. So I started my career in London Transport. Today is Northern Transport for London as a customer service assistant. And in what I thought was, you could call it a brilliant moment or not. I proposed an idea with no background whatsoever, and it was more like flippant talking. I said something and it was flippant, and I said, well, we can do something with some of this information that's on here. This was the time before where you had computers everywhere or computerized information everywhere. I said, we could do something with some of the things that we have when we give directions to people. When they come to the stations or when they're using the bus service, we can give them directions. Instead of flicking through books, we can put it in a computer. And my boss, a Jamaican, Jamaicans are very upfront people, said to me, his name is Benny, I'll never forget him, and he said to me, oh, Val, you do a lot of talking. Put something together, let us see whether what you're saying actually makes any sense. I got challenged. I started on a journey. I went back home when I bought a computer on as a loan. I took a loan from a bank. 2 days later, I bought a computer, put it in the house. Got a friend of mine who knew a bit more about computers than I did. He helped me set it up. And the next thing I knew, a journey had started. My journey and it was Windows 3.11, if I remember well. A journey had started of exploring. I sat there for the whole weekend. I remember that computer was bought on a Friday. I sat and slept at that desk for 3 days. I wanted to know everything. I went into Microsoft Access. I wanted to know everything. Anyway, 4 weeks later, I knew enough to take one of the booklets that we used to give out information on the stations, put it into a computerized access database, as crude as it was those days, put it onto a floppy disk, and I'm sure a lot of you would never have used floppy disk because you're too young. Floppy disk was something equivalent to CD-ROM, but a floppy disk in those days that we used. I put it on the floppy disk and then took it into work. I said to Ben, remember you said to me, blah, blah, 4 weeks ago. Ben said, yeah. I said, come, let me show you. I took him to an old computer, a 486 computer, sitting one of the back of the computers there, decorating one of the rooms in one of the mess rooms there. I put it through in there. I showed it on the screen, and I showed him, if you do this, if you type in this K will bring up every information about Kensington Station. If you type in London Bridge, if you type in L, it will filter it. Now this sounds very basic right now. in 96, this was not basic at all. And I showed it to him, and Benny said, wow. Anyway, long story short, I went back to work, didn't hear anything about it again. And 3 weeks later, I was summoned by the general manager for the Northern Line, Frank Fullick, who incidentally runs the metro train stations today. I know that because I'm still in touch with him. His name is Frank Fullick. Look him up if you want to. And Frank said to me, Frank sent for me, and everyone said to me, oh, you've probably done something, you're going to lose your job, because he had this reputation for getting rid of people they felt that weren't pulling their weight and stuff like that. And I went in. Anyway, not story short, I ended up working on a project that was doing exactly what I was meant to do, called the Roots database, built by Logica. I was seconded from the level I was at to 2 levels to go report to an executive director of information strategy, Mike Stallard, who became my mentor, who also reported to a minister, as well as to the general manager for London Transport at the time. And that's part of how my career started. Obviously, a lot of pressure, a lot of learning to do. At this point, I started teaching myself even more Microsoft Access, Windows 98, those bad scripts, which was predominantly what I needed to know, or what I believe I needed to know at the time. I worked unpaid for 8 months as a trainee database administrator in a not-for-profit organization called Battle Bridge Center, King's Cross, London. And the idea was to try and get more experience. It was actually Microsoft Access. I understand Microsoft Access and VB scripting at the time, understand it more. And that was what led me to doing that as well at that point. I went back to university, studied for a Master's of Science degree. It was challenging, difficult. Coming from background, my first degree was not in computer science, by the way. My first degree was in psychology. It was challenging, difficult. I required a huge amount of learning on my own. Google was a few years away from inception at this point, so information was not as readily available as it is today. You had to rely on books. I remember a friend of mine's older brother. I followed him around. I used to stalk him because he knew more than I did at the time. I used to stalk him literally. Wherever he was at work, what time are you finishing? I would join him. I took every opportunity to learn from him what I could. So my first job after leaving university, was a role we call an analyst programmer. And that role, for some reason, doesn't exist as much today. But that role was you did your analysis or requirements gathering and also wrote the code. So you were trained. It was almost a training position, but you built your system by doing your analysis yourself or business requirement gathering, setting all that up, and then writing the code for it as well. And I had to do it as a Visual Basic developer at the time, as a SQL Server developer. And I was assigned to write and enhance a newspaper distribution software application for News of the World. I spent 7 days a week working, learning and teaching myself for over 12 months. It was challenging, very challenging, and it took a lot to even stay afloat and do it on an average basis. Took a lot. I was also involved in a project that dealt with validating pilots licenses because the software company I worked for at the time built the application. It was a project I worked as part of a team of developers as well. A trainee developer at the time. In my quest to learn more, I set up a restaurant in my house as a data center, simulating computer networks, hosting database servers, all running on Unix servers. I'm almost certain I lost a girlfriend or two at the time. I was thinking to myself, this guy's a nerd. When they come to my house, I'm like, wow, computers everywhere. Even my venture partner, my wife today, remembers what that room looked like. You know, it's the first time she looked in it. It was like a data center, a mini data center, and it was all set up to teach me and for me to learn what I needed to learn. I felt I had a lot of catching up to do. Not having done a first degree in computer science, I had very few time to cover what I had not done in my first degree to be able to stay afloat and stay competitive and have the knowledge. And I was very passionate about it as well at the time. In 1998, my next job was supporting and enhancing an electricity billing system developed for Accenture, British Gas, Centrica. This is where my DevOps background started. At this point, it was not known as DevOps, but fell into the category of application support or maintenance. Now, DevOps as a concept existed and had practitioners prior to Patrick DeBoer, who's regarded as the father of DevOps, coined the term in 2009. What is DevOps? The big question. Okay, so continuous integration, continuous testing, continuous deployment, and continuous monitoring. So you develop, you build, you fuse, you integrate, you code, you test, you release that code, you deploy it, you monitor, you operate it, and it's continuous. Following the agile methodology, the Scrum pattern, where you're delivering features that are working features, following the life cycle that goes through, that instead of it saying, I'm going to wait to do each of the SDLC, software development lifecycle. We're going to wait to do each part of it when it finishes, which is your waterfall approach. We're now doing things in parallel. And I'll go into a bit more detail of that. Now, I'm not going to go into defining that or reading all of that out, but I put it in there for completeness. But DevOps, basic understanding, fusion, development, and operations. The problem was, which I'm going to enumerate in a minute, if you don't fuse development and operations, what you have is siloed teams where from development, and remember, coding and code, millions of moving parts, for lack of a better way of putting it, millions of moving parts. If you ever programmed in a language called COBOL, which I did briefly, what you would write in, I don't know, Python today, in 5 lines, you write it in 78 or 90 lines in COBOL. So we're not playing. You know, those days, some of these systems that were based on Unix, some of the systems were used by utility companies, large enterprise companies, banks, were not funny. The level of coding that needed to be done and tracking that code and for something to go wrong was not funny. So like needle in a haystack. So when you did the silo thing where you had DevOps, where you had development team, testing, configuration management team, deployment team, maintenance team, production support team, it did not work. It was a nightmare. I walked across these whole areas and it wasn't funny. That's what DevOps emerged to solve. DevOps says, well, I'm going to use tools, utilities, governance, framework. I'm going to use all of this to ensure that there's a seamless fusion of development and operations, down to the point where I push this into production, down to the point where it's maintained, down to the releases that I do later on. Everything is fused. Same team, one team working across that whole pathway, and things working in sync, both from a framework approach and from a governance approach. Now, my DevOps career story. The electricity market opened to competition in 1998. Centrica British Gas successfully applied and became a supplier. Because prior to this, they only supplied gas. So now they're going into electricity. New area, new market for them. Centrica had to develop over 30 electricity software applications to assist with bidding in the national grid, sales distribution, billing, support and maintenance. Now, in today's age, you would use microservices. You would not build it in the same way. Now, I'm happy to take questions on that when we get to questions, because I'm not going to go into too much of microservices, but some of it. In today's age, but in those days, you built 30 individual applications, and some of it at a cost of, I don't know, 20 million pounds each, 10 million pounds each, if not more than that. The billing system alone, we're talking about here, cost over 100 million to build. Accenture, Logica, I don't remember who else was in that picture. Some of the leading world software developers were involved in building that system at the time. So Centrica had to develop over 30 electricity software applications to assist with bidding in the national grid, sales distribution, billing, support, and maintenance. That electricity systems that now spanned over 300 development, test, pre-prod, BAU, support, training, non-functional, load or performance, end-to-end and integration IT environments. At this point, I'm going to define an IT environment, just in case, and I'm assuming you all know what it means, but I'm just going to define it for completeness. Test environment, IT environment, we call it simply a test bed that is used to simulate the behavior of an application. When you've coded an application, you got to test it. The test beds, the different stages of testing that you do before you put it in for consumers to now, for your customers or clients to now use that system is what we're talking about. Now, in some organizations, they have in excess of 1,000 of these things. They could be virtual environments. Today's age, they could be containers. Obviously, the time I'm talking about, there was nothing like containers at the time. It could be more virtual environments, is what you find was the hypervisor type environments is what you find was the predominant thinking at the time, predominant method or way to go about that. Now spanned over, so 300 development test environments. So in other words, imagine CBA as an application. You log into CBA. Imagine having 300 of CBA applications to look after, used in different ways, or 300 of that level of applications. Full-fledged application with simulated data, test data, live data in some cases, and scrambled data in some cases as well, especially when the data is sensitive as well. These 300 IT environments needed code to be deployed to it every other day, as there was a tight regulatory schedule to deliver it, and testing carried out in them and monitored. In my team, on average, we're all individually responsible for deploying to supporting and maintaining maybe 50 to 70 environments each. We have to write command line driven Unix shell and Perl script. Well, I got tired of moving code around and being move code from here. This is all on Unix platforms anyway. Moving code around and doing it. So I sat down one day and I wrote something similar to a deployment tool. So we used to write all of that. These things existed even before the word DevOps were coined. They were, if you like, rudimentary DevOps tools and techniques that were used to also deploy code, to monitor what was happening, and to do all kinds of things within these environments as well. At the time, you've got Bitbucket and you've got, different GitLab and all the rest of them today. But the time they were industry. There was a Perforce, and there was another one that starts with a C called. I can't remember the name of it. It's too long now. Can't remember the name of that one now. And deploying it to all environments to include production, then monitor and support the environment. So that was the job. These scripts and automation programs were makeshift DevOps tools or techniques, and that's where they came from. What we didn't have at the time was that thinking. There were attempts to try and fuse development and operations. There were a number of attempts. There was no industry standard. There was no understanding. There was no framework to follow. But people knew that it needed to go in this direction because that's the only way we could avoid the numerous bugs that were coming up, the numerous problems that were coming up, the issues that were coming up. And I'm not saying that with DevOps, it is now perfect, because it isn't. In the industry, it is not perfect. There's still a lot of problems in the big organizations, either from implementation, from framework, the way it's implemented, some of the ethos within that business environment, that if you don't deal with that, there's no amount of DevOps you apply that's going to make it a difference. Now, this is a pictograph of, there's loads of them, and I'm sure you've either been taught some of them, trained on some of them. We use quite a few here. Jira, we actually plug into Jira. We plug into Jira and we pull data from Jira, one of our tools. We use Trello quite a bit, Slack, there's all sorts of Bitbucket. Bitbucket is our primary code repo, and we have a huge one because everything is managed through there, and deployment is done through there. You have load impact, you have load balancers as well. You've got Chef, Puppet, Ansible, name Kubernetes is in there, name them, they're all in there. And again, this slide, as I mentioned, certainly if required, can be shared across. By all means, if this is something you want to hold on to, we can make it happen and share the slides across as well. Okay. Why did DevOps emerge? Now, as I probably have alluded to this already, but for completeness, I repeat some of it again as well. So DevOps emerged to use both automation and better governance to bridge the gap between development and operations. As I already explained, DevOps now catered for and fostered quicker, more accurate releases to the production system. The blame game, the siloed practice which characterized the previous waterfall approach versus a new agile one, Scrum, of throwing code over the fence to another, was eliminated mostly. The DevOps team now emerged as a now clearly labeled development and operations team to take ownership across the build, deploy to test, deploy to production, and support in production. And by doing that, they gained a lot of experience, because part of it as well was, if the person who deployed to test is not the person who deployed to production, you've already missed knowledge. There's been a knowledge gap there, because the person who's deployed to test has done it so many times. So when they're doing the production and something goes wrong, they have a better idea and they know what to need to tweak if it's necessary to tweak it in that environment to make it work, to make sure it's working accurately, perfectly, and effectively as well. Companies like Google, Amazon, YouTube, Facebook, adopting a microservices approach in delivering application features, also pushed along the industry in this direction as well. Now, this is what I mentioned, and these are methodologies, if you like. Certainly, the Agile and the Waterfall. I started my career in the Waterfall, and another methodology called DSDM. DSDM was actually very, very similar to Agile, but Agile obviously is I would argue, the industry standard to a point. Are there projects that still need Waterfall? Perhaps. I'll be very careful. I think in some cases, and where I've had to run large programs of work, I had to run a large software program for PwC and IAG Insurance as a consultant. And what I tend to do is borrow from both. For controls, I tend to favor Waterfall. So I add processes or framework within the Waterfall approach to have effective controls. Agile can be a runaway methodology, because obviously you're allowing things to go on continuously. So as you can see in there, in the Waterfall, you design first, you approve, You're happy with that, you build, you approve. You're happy with that, you take to test, you approve. It is one cycle, finishes, the next one starts, finish, the next one starts. That's a waterfall. Your agile says, you know what, we can do it in a sprint. Now we use the agile methodology quite heavily. Right now we're running, we run sprints continuously. We have part of the features of a sprint is a daily stand-up. We have a daily stand-up today, and we run continuous sprints. And our sprints run, I believe we run weekly, and in some cases 2 weekly sprints, depending on the project, depending how big this thing is. Those sprints deliver the product catalog, which is literally the requirements of what you're building, but we design, build, test, and deploy features continuously as a continuous cycle, as you can see in sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4, and it's continuous as a cycle. Now, my preferred method is to use both, especially if it's a large project. If it's a large enterprise project, my preferred method is that we use both of them, and you use the waterfall to make sure that the agile methodology or an agile project does not become a runaway project, because I've also seen that happen. So how does this all come together? DevOps lends itself to the agile. That continuous delivery, your continuous integration, lends itself very well to, as we showed before, your design, your build, your test, and deploy. Virtualization, containerization, Docker and Kubernetes. Now, I've used VMware, a virtualization example here, obviously Docker and Kubernetes. Now, and I'm sure you're all very aware of this, so I won't go into too much detail here. But virtualization, we logically divide computer system resources hosted on a physical computer hardware device using software such as VMware Fusion, Parallels Desktop, Oracle VM VirtualBox, VM Workstation, Citrix. Citrix lends itself to the desktop, so literally you're virtualizing a desktop and serving it from a server. I hated Citrix, but that's a different story. It was always very slow, and I think also because what bandwidth requirements were at the time, it wasn't a technology I was very fond of. Most infrastructure as a service, IaaS, cloud provisioning services underpinned by host server virtualization. So in your Amazon Web Services or your AWS EC2 compute services, quite a number of the infrastructure you see there, when you start up an instance, a lot of it will be running off virtualized hardware. Containerization, the future, one of the key areas in the way that we not only package software, the way that we run and the way we present resources for an application to use them. Containerization, in my view, is probably one of the biggest ones of our time, certainly in the last 15 years. The fact that you can bundle, and we use containerization, we use Docker containers quite a bit. We use Docker to deploy Omnium Lite. Omnium Lite runs on the LAMP stack. And for those who don't know what the LAMP stack means, your Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP bundle stack, if you like. And it runs on there. We literally use that and run it off a desktop. So we package everything with that. And the beauty of containerization is that it doesn't care what operating system, whether it's Windows. We don't build applications on Windows. Well, traditionally, I guess because my background is very Unix based. So containerization there. Obviously, it negates the need for deployed software applications to depend on any other operating system libraries or versions at execution time. Okay. Docker is the most popular. OWASP Kubernetes host supports container orchestrating platform that run across any cluster of network resources like Docker and containerd. So Kubernetes supports your container orchestrating platform when it's presented as a cluster or leveraging it as from a cluster. So cloud provisioning Lambda serverless software stacks. Now, Service Australia, and I think in the public sector, I'm sure in the private sector, quite a large usage of some of these concepts of technology you mentioned, containerization, software stacks and things like that. But obviously, Service Australia is one of the biggest ones because the ATO. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in this presentation who lives in Australia who is not served in one form or the other by Service Australia. It's a huge, they have a huge data center as well. It's a huge operations there. And they serve everyone, serve all the 25 million Australians who live in Australia. So obviously your ATO, your Centrelink, MyGov, and places like that. Today, most of the digital services we consume from the Australia Public Service is hosted in AWS EC2 for your compute. And obviously, Amazon Web Services from all the other services and products, cloud-based ones as well. So Microsoft Azure and internal data centers as well. Service Australia makes use of, and I can't go into too much detail, some of this is wrapped in all forms of confidentiality and also given security clearance as well. Use OpenStack to provide infrastructure as a service cloud offering, converting bare metal servers into an on-demand like infrastructure as a service cloud provisioning solution. So what that means in English is OpenStack and software which belongs to Red Hat now, I believe, yes, it's Red Hat, is used to literally convert bare metal servers in a data center and present them in a on-demand like IS cloud provisioning solution like EC2, AWS EC2. And then OpenShift, which is literally doing the different thing, is now used to spin up thousands of Docker-like containers hosted on the infrastructure, the service structure that serves to provide automatic computer resources required by software apps, literally in demand in seconds. Just to give you an idea, I get into a bit more detail into that one. In Service Australia, the way it runs is containers are called on demand. Literally, containers are called and it is scripted to build the application in an instance. So in other words, if a container stops running or anything goes wrong in a container, another container immediately is automatically spinned up and built with the same capability in seconds. It is when it works really well. And I use that carefully. When it works really well. But that's how Service Australia use it. And it's quite interesting. Large numbers of containers running all over the place. I'm talking 700-800 containers running in one go, 1,000, 2,000 containers running. And all managed between managed via OpenShift. The above arrangement almost mimics Lambda serverless resources in the way that it's called up on demand. And for those who don't know what Lambda is, obviously Lambda serverless, one of the Amazon Web Services ones, where resources are presented to you rather than spinning up a server. It is a bucket of resources, and you call up whatever resource that you need on the fly, and you use that to host an application. The software stack in use in Service Australia is Java House, obviously, is the main stack. So MongoDB, which for all purposes is a non-relational database, as against a relational database, which is based on normalized data, relationships between data. I won't go into too much of that, but I'm happy to take any question later on that. But yes, MongoDB, which is becoming popular, particularly when you're looking to pull information in a very fast-paced manner, and you do not mind storing information like JSON or XML type format to pull it from the database directly. Obviously, Express Java and Angular Node.js, which is quite popular, are quite popular as well. So that's your main stack: MongoDB, Express.js for a backend web framework, AngularJS from the framework, and your Node.js as well. OWASP. So that's a good one. Now, this one, we get excited about this one because this is where it begins, and this is where the industry and everyone needs to be pushing. So I was quite pleased when I saw that this was included as something we need to talk about, because this is an area that I have actually been writing about. I think one of the articles I've written recently for Forbes touches on this as well. And I think this is an area that is of key importance as well. So, top 10 word application security risks. Now, OWASP defines this, and I'm not going to go there. I mean, you can see some of the areas, broken access control, cryptographic failures, injection, insecure design, security misconfiguration. And I understand you haven't actually got to this, so I won't go into much detail. I'm sure you get a lot of it, a lot more of it, and more detail from the lectures. Vulnerable and outdated components, identification, authentication failures, software and data integrity failures, security logging, monitoring failures, server-side request forgery. Now, we test, and I'll explain this a little bit more. There's now renewed emphasis, and this is what I say we're writing about. This is some of the conversation I was having at the right level with the cybersecurity shadow minister. There's now renewed emphasis on security at the software application layer, especially as traditional methods at the network and firewall identity management layer are proving not to be enough anymore to impede cybercrime. We've all seen what's happening in the last some years. I mean, I've actually had my data compromised twice. One from, once actually. One from one of the financial services that got hacked here. I can't remember the name now. I got hacked recently here. And Optus as well. People's data got compromised. So we're all becoming victims of this crime, and our traditional methods alone have not worked, either in the way they've been implemented, even the fact that more needs to be done. We need to look at different layers and other layers, and OWASP lends itself very nicely, in my view, to breeding some of these areas, to pushing for some of these areas to emerge, to add new layers or improve on the layers that already exist in the way that we secure data and applications. Now, internally, we don't, everything we build, we do an extensive penetration test. I have a team lead who is a what do they call them? A dark, he's an ethical hacker, and he's as skilled as a normal hacker. And he has a team that he leads, and we try to break everything. We try to break everything that we build. We go through this process. We literally go through everything you see on this list. We attack all the applications we build for clients, because we build for clients and we build our own products as well. We attack them and try to break them. And when we break them, we go back to resolve them. We don't put anything out there till we can go through all of this. So we actually implement this and we do this. So this is serious business as well. Penetration testing to check and apply for fixes for all the above, to also include accurate encryption for data, both in transmission and at rest. And I repeat that, both in transmission and at rest is now incredibly and very paramount. I'll leave that linger for a minute or so, a second or so, before I move on to the next slide. Since this one is a new topic for you guys as well. Okay. Moving on. So I've used an illustration here. I've used Xlite again, and because Xlite kind of lends itself, I couldn't think of anything else to use, but I've used one that we know, and we know that's what's happened with it. So, and we use an analogy here. This is actually done for a 3D concept. They're working on for some of the work we're doing in Silicon Valley, the launch, and that's what we're working on. So I said I added this to show some of the things we're talking about here. I had mentioned earlier. So 3D animation concepts, security traditional tools, and Xlite. Analogy, attempt to break into, excuse me, Analogy, attempting to break into an IT network and stealing data, and attempting to break into a house and to steal gold from a safe. Now, if you look there, you see the burglars and the cyber criminals, the house security. Now, today, and this is not an exhaustive list, we use, obviously, these are the layers that we use to protect from gaining access to an IT network, an IT ecosystem, or even getting to the data. Your zero trust, your two-factor, your ID management, your firewall, probably a few other ones there, but this is probably the majority of it as well. Xlite says, now, you now need a last line of defense. We're saying that in your application. Now, Xlite embodies what we're talking about, which is why I've used that example here. Not only do you need to encrypt at the highest levels of encryption, or the best levels of cryptography that we know today, which is your 256 AES with encryption, not only do you need to encrypt at that level, you also now need to use 4 factors, but in a manner that does not slow down your ability to use an application, your ability to retrieve data, your ability to use any system. Done in a seamless manner, automated in a seamless manner. But a 3-factor, a password, a one-time password that comes via email or SMS, an authenticator, the Okta one, or the Google Authenticator, 3 factors. The 3rd factor being push notification, which is what Xlite uses. So Xlite says, I am not letting you in, I am not letting you see that data until you go to a 3-factor. Xlite is on version 2.1. We'll be on version 3.1 next year. And next year, we're going for a 4th factor. The 4th factor is biometrics, a fingerprint, a thumbprint, and face recognition. The idea is we do not want anybody to get to that data that's not the right person. So in using 3 factors, we are now relying on an external device, which is a phone. In using, which is the phone, and not just the phone, we're relying on a 3rd-party application that's been built for that, which is Okta in this case. And okay, organizations use Google Authenticator, but they use that as a 2nd factor. We deploy 3-factor here. You will not find a lot of applications at the moment, but we're pushing and we're explaining and we're writing that people now need to start building applications to have a 3rd factor to protect that data. Based on how sophisticated some of these attacks have become, we now need to start going to these levels of extremity, if you like, to make sure that you cannot get to that data. I'll let that linger for a second or so, and then I'll move to the next slide. Okay, moving on to the next one. Now, in this next slide, emerging information technology precepts. The reason why I've added it, and I was happy, and when it was part of what was discussed and we talk about is, I know how it is when you're starting in a career. When I started my career, I honestly did not know where I was going to land. I knew where my passions led me, and I followed my passion. I urge you to follow your passion. The reason why I'm using this particular slide is to show you the breadth of what we're dealing with, of the areas and the sectors, the specialties within this area, and all of them equally as lucrative. All of them, all you need is your passion, your ability to learn, you wanting to learn enough to add value to that area, to add value. When you add value to that area by learning, and learning it so well, you understand it and you're contributing to it, you derive value, maximum value. I'm a firm believer that for you to derive value, you need to add value. That's what this slide is about. So these are the trends, and there are a few of them. I think we captured most of them. I won't be surprised if we miss one or two. As you know, this area is fast moving, very fast moving. Things are emerging on a daily basis. It's a fast moving environment, but this is what we've done. The source is there as well. And by the way, in each of these slides, I've tried to put in sources as well, because I know that obviously this is more of an academic presentation. It's always good to know where this information comes from, where as relevant. So I've added that as well. But then there's a click on the source, it tells where it's come from as well. So new technology trends 2023, artificial intelligence. We know all about that one. Metaverse, blockchain, quantum computing, digital immune system, hyper automation, datafication, industry cloud platforms, wireless value realization, a digitally edible world, a hyper-connected intelligent world, a sustainable tech. These are all areas that need people like you to specialize, become experts in them, and help to guide your generation to leverage this and live in a much better society than previous. That's what this is about. Okay, let's dig in a little bit more then. All right, artificial intelligence. Again, I'm not going to go into too much of a definition here. ability to build intelligence, human-like intelligence, to carry out problem-solving tasks much faster and more accurately than humans. Now, where do you start? You've seen robot cleaners. You've seen the latest robot, the one that has expression. I forgot the name now. I was watching the video the other day. I mean, it's endless. It's endless. There are issues, in my view, where artificial intelligence is applied, and I think human moderation needs to be involved quite heavily. Now, that's my stand on it, and other people, there are different stands in the industry, different stands, and I have reason to believe that. I've had even personal experience with artificial intelligence-like technology, where we think it's precise, but it's only precise and only as accurate as to the data and the intelligence you built into it. That's something very key. There are some things that might require human beings. And I remember the story of iRobot. And I don't know if any of you watched this movie, iRobot, with Will Smith in it. And one thing that I took from there, and believe me, iRobot is on his way, whether we like it or not. We are getting to the age, if not today, not the next 10 years, 15 years. If you watch that movie of iRobot, we are coming close, very, very close. First time I watched that movie, it was like, oh, okay, that's not well, on what planet would that happen? I no longer hold that view. In iRobot, Will Smith is involved in an accident. 2 cars, for people who've not watched it, 2 cars end up in water. They're drowning. A robot jumps in and wants to save Will Smith. Will Smith is saying to him, no, don't save me. Go and save a child that is still alive in the other car, the car they collided with. Go save that child in that car. It's a child. Leave me. Will Smith was willing to sacrifice his life for a child. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. I can anyway. Where somebody will say, you know what? I'm an old man. I'd like to give this child a chance of living. And maybe not, but maybe at that point you may make one decision or the other. Well, in this case, Will Smith made that decision that he rather that the child was saved first. The robot did a calculation and said he did his calculation based on who had the best chance of living. That was robot doing calculations based on intelligence it was taught. With a human being if a human being was a rescuer, would he have acted in the same way? I'm not going to answer that one. I'll leave that one as a food for thought. Metaverse, social media, digital networking conducted via 3D models underpinning real-time interaction. Now, we've seen what Facebook has done with privacy data and what they did with affecting the elections in the United States and what Russia did. And there's no free copy of tea. If you use TikTok and you use Facebook, they're going to make money off you somehow if you're not paying for it. It's a simple analogy in life. There's no free cup of tea. If you're using it free of charge, you're not. Somewhere along the line, someone is deriving value and taking payment for it. And that's what Facebook did. That's what social media is doing. Metaverse was heightening that. I have my own views about Metaverse, but it is there. Blockchain, obviously, that's a good one. Obviously, some of the cryptocurrencies underpinned by blockchain, but I'm more interested and I'm more attracted, I must say, to the blockchain technology and the way that the chain ledger that provides for that visibility and all users to collectively maintain control, which can be applied to anything. And we'll talk about, we'll go into an area it's applied to quite effectively as well, or it can be applied to, or it's already applied to quite effectively as well. So blockchain. Quantum computing, again, we've seen some of the deep blue chess, and there's a lot of work going on in there. IBM is doing quite a bit of work and applying it, even health-related areas as well. I was privileged to watch a demo of some analytics type demo of what a quantum computer was doing in one of the Vegas conventions some years ago. Quite interesting watching that. So quantum computing is a rapidly emerging technology that harnesses obviously the law of quantum physics, mechanics to solve problems too complex for classical computers. I will add not just too complex, but speed, because some problems need to solve it in time. So one of the biggest, and I'm not a quantum computer expert of any kind, but one of the areas it tends to lend itself is the speed. Obviously, it can do what your regular computers to do, and it's from a software-driven point of view and from a chipset point of view, a resources point of view as well, in helping us solve problems a heck of a lot faster than you would do in traditional computers today. Now, digital immune system, DIS, this digital immune system is well, essentially protocols, technologies, methodologies designed to protect networks, infrastructure, and applications from various types of cyber threats. It turns out that we are actually working on one. I explained that earlier, and I'm working on one, and it's called xlight.ai. I put a link in there to some of the comments. It's still probably 50% developed, and we're working on. We think that by mid to late next year, we'll be ready to start demoing that. We need a lot of data, which is one of data particularly for enterprises, and we're gathering some of the data we need to build that. But predominantly, what xlight AI does is it's a DIS, it's a digital immune system, and what it does is it profiles where attacks come from, where cyber attacks come from via IP addresses, via known locations, via information on the dark web. It profiles it and uses that to build a picture and tries to target, preempt an attack before it comes. So for argument's sake, playing it out, xlight AI would detect an attack, would profile an IP address and say, I know this IP address, or profile the infrastructure of where an IP address is coming from. Unmasking some of the hidden proxies and subnet mask. And I don't know if I've gone too deep into this, but yeah, but that's what it does. That's what xlight AI does. But that's an example of digital immune system. I'm going to go deeper than that. Happy to take questions on that as I'm able to. And we'll get to that point as well. Hyperautomation, continuous automation and installing business processes with intelligence, using robotics, and we'll talk about physical robots, software robots, physical robots built with AI, machine learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning. That also underpins auto finding other processes to automate, and also support human efforts. And I can explain that. So not only are you building intelligence, and intelligence and automation, or adding intelligence to automation, or using intelligence to automate business processes, but also you're building intelligence that allows it to identify other processes to automate as well, or to support human efforts. Certification, and I mentioned this, I alluded to this earlier on. Obviously, all the data that's captured from your social media platforms, which companies such as Meta, TikTok, Snapchat, X, formerly known as Twitter, have all been collected, then monetized for such data profit, disregarding privacy concerns. Now, this area I think will change. There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of conversation. Certainly, these guys have been getting pulled in into the US Senate to explain and to find ways. There's definitely a lot of work to stop this from happening. Now, it could go either way. Some of it might end up being that some of this data that we go back to the point where you pay for something as a user, a consumer of these products or services or digital products. You pay for something, but you also gain from it as well. In the fact that your data becomes more and more of your own asset, and you decide on how you want, and you make money from it being monetized. Now, we're very far away from it, but I think there's a lot of conversation in that direction, and perhaps that might be a direction it would go, but it cannot carry on the way it's carried on. Data is becoming a big issue. We're producing huge amounts of it, and ownership of it in the way it is owned cannot carry on, in my view, in the way that it has carried on till date. Industry cloud platforms, obviously, the Amazon Web Services, your Microsoft Azure, your GCP, Google Cloud Platform, all providing computing cloud resources, CPU, memory, on demand for a fee. Companies using cloud computing save 20% annual infrastructure costs. The source is there, where they came from. Obviously, offerings include infrastructure as a service, software as a service, which is literally subscribing to software and using joint software. So the way you would use Hotmail or your Gmail account as software as a service, or platform as a service, and all of that cloud services as well. This is a huge industry. There are jobs in here. There are all kinds. DevOps architect, there's cloud architect, there's all kinds of things in there. And all these areas all have different applications of it. Choose your area of passion, gain the knowledge, go after it, do placements, do work placement, gain as much knowledge. Universities are not going to give you all that knowledge. Engage with the industry. They will give you the building ground. Universities have never been known in any part of the world to give you all of that knowledge. It is a building block. Go get the knowledge. Go for your passion. You're going to do it the rest of your life. You're going to make money from it. You're going to pay it. You're going to get bills. There are days when you're going to wake up and it'll be frustrating. You want to be where you have your passion. That's what I did. Wireless value realization. Gartner uses the term wireless value realization to describe the range of ways, and Gartner is one of the biggest think tanks on the planet, obviously, to describe the range of ways in which next generation wireless technology will soon deliver new and improved and reduced capital costs. 6G wireless connectivity, powering IoT, telesurgery, mobile app, remote car start. I mean, there are cars now. You can use your mobile phone to start the car without even being near it. I'm talking from you could be up in the skies flying to New Zealand and start your car, open your garage, as long as there's Wi-Fi on that flight. Obviously, wireless value realization, 6G wireless connectivity. The more of this, obviously, which feeds us with more effective, more reliable, more stable internet. We think of ways to apply this technology to assist us on a day-to-day basis in the things that we do to solve business problems, world problems, society problems, all the general problems we have today in our society. We look for ways of using technology as it becomes even better to solve these problems. Wireless, huge industry, huge areas, different things coming out of it. A digitally edible world, and I alluded to this with the blockchain one, again, even with, and this is an application of what we're talking about, refers to a concept where digital technology information are seamlessly integrated into the way we produce, distribute, prepare, and consume food. Precision farming becoming a big thing. You watch some videos, it's like, oh, wow. Watch some videos on LinkedIn, oh, wow. Smart packaging, traceability, blockchain traceability. Blockchain lends itself to helping you identify, to make sure that the food you're consuming is what it says it is. The QA, the fact that no added derivatives. How do we know for certain apart from what was labeled on it? Blockchain lends itself because you now have a chain of people who are maintaining that information and data by the time it gets to you. Wonderful, powerful use of blockchain. Hyper-connected, intelligent world. 5G and 6G comes connectivity, all underpinning a world increasingly getting digitally connected in the form of IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, mobile apps, smart devices, interconnected robots, undertaking tasks, doing things, helping us perform tasks, automating tasks around our life, making our life easier. Sustainable tech. So for the climate, technology that is meant to remedy, improve, offset carbonation, environment setbacks or problems. Technology that is produced using green or ecologically responsible materials or processes. These are all areas of application, all areas that require warriors of experts of knowledge that are groomed to go into this world and to help to make this reality, to help our world develop even better. So that's it. Questions and related discussions. Now, I'll say questions pertaining to career paths in DevOps. I was very keen to leave enough time, and it looks like I've succeeded in doing that. Questions pertaining to career paths in DevOps, cybersecurity, software engineering, business analysis, AI, etc., across any emerging areas of the industry are very welcome, or anything related I'm happy to assist, answer. For those I do not know, I'm sure I can think of what direction to point you to getting those answers. And that's been done. Hopefully, this was all clear. I wasn't too fast, and then some of the material came across, some information came across as I wanted it to. Thank you. I think you're mute. I think you're mute. You're mute. I can't hear you. I can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, that's better.
Now.
I can hear you now. Yes.
Well, thanks again for a very interesting and encouraging, inspiring lecture. I can see our student do have a few questions.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see them in the chat.
Okay, let's have a look. Let's see.
So there was one question from Vikas about if you can elaborate how you manage to run agile methodology without it becoming a project itself.
Okay. Okay. So the question was, how do we? So checks and controls. Sorry, I'm trying to actually look at the question to make sure I'm answering correctly. Let me go to the. So this was in the chat, was it?
Yep.
Let's have a look. Where's it? I don't see. Why am I not seeing the? Hang on, I'm not seeing that. Why not?
Could it be because you are sharing?
Okay. Oh, okay. That's probably why. All right. So, no, actually, I still can't see anything. Can he ask verbally? Can the person go on mute and ask me verbally? Because that might be easier. Because I want to hear exactly, so I can give you my best answer. Whoever asked the question.
Yeah, because you can unmute and ask.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much
Okay.
for it was very inspiring actually just to listen to your background, how it developed into where you are right now. That's interesting. Can you elaborate a little bit more? When I noticed when you're talking about how you run agile, but you don't make it into a project itself, and you're careful about that. That's kind of a challenging thing for all, us a lot of times, because that in itself becomes we started to implement some project management tools and everything to actually help us around agile methodology, to implement that mindset change. It became a project by itself, and everybody started to realize, and leadership team started to realize this is a lot more taxing than anybody anticipates. And then they start to realize that, is it really going and getting us that return on investment at this stage? Then how would an industry expert look into it and be keen to understand what mistakes people make, and how your experience actually helps to develop that? And I'll be happy to look into that as well in my projects.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so one of the problems with DevOps, and one of the problems with a lot of concepts when they come up, and it's happening to DevOps as well. There are people who would practice it to the core because it becomes a buzzword. Now, I have never applied every single principle of Agile in any project ever, and there's a very good reason for that. Sometimes I say, I've been in meetings and say, "Oh, what methodology are you applying?" I say, I'm borrowing from a bit of it, because when you sit down and think about it, methodology is actually common sense. It is common sense. And if you apply it in a manner that is, because there's never going to be one size fits all. Different organizations are in different levels of sophistication of the journey of development, or the journey of digitization. So to turn around and say, I have one size fits all, it's never going to work. So what I do is to adapt to the environment. So the first thing I do is to study the environment, to study their level of sophistication, how they work, how they document, the level of experience of people who are in that environment. And based on that, I do almost a hybrid of waterfall and agile. I borrow from the agile methodology where I need to. And the area that I think we borrow from mostly, particularly even with our own internal products that we build, is the stand-up. One of the biggest challenges of most projects is communication. In fact, I would argue communication, 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 and communication is always the problem. Now, Agile did something really good in its framework in the way that it insists on the stand-ups, and some of the thought points and some of the workshops that it prescribes does really help to bridge that gap and for the right people to communicating. So the product owner, the people that are vested in building that system, all those people involved in touch basing, and the fact that within their touch base, within touching base, and making sure they're on the right track. Between that, there is also an element of them working together and almost using a prototype. A prototype is more of the DSDM methodology, but prototyping, because technically speaking, what you're doing in those sprints is you are prototyping. That's what you're doing. You're building features and saying, does it look like this? From a UI point of view, from a functionality point of view, where you can, does it look like this? Then the user says, the potential is no, it does not look like this. So you revamp that. So you have earlier on in the day. So short answer to your question, a lot of organizations apply DevOps as a crusade in itself. We apply DevOps as a means to an end. And we borrow what we need to borrow, so the DevOps and the Agile methodology. And we borrow what we need to borrow from the Agile methodology as necessary to implement what we need to. We don't follow everything. I have never seen been in a environment where every aspect of DevOps as prescribed is followed, which is probably what he even says. It is a guide to let you use some of its features, if you like, and deliver what you need to deliver. But following a framework and a governance and a way of thinking, DevOps is very much a way of thinking with the products to help you support that way of thinking and deliver it as you need to. Hopefully, I didn't lose you in that answer. Happy to go even further if I've not answered you. Yep, is that good?
Thank you so much. It makes sense.
Okay.
We started off with that, and then looking at how the environment wasn't really responding to the methodology, because the strict manner that it actually expects that things should be done, because the industry is very dynamic. You always keep on changing from department to department, people to people, culture to culture. So yeah, we also ended up doing that. So the earlier contractor we had is very strict. We have to follow all of this to get the result. Then it doesn't work for everybody. So changed it to someone else, and okay, let's use it as a guide to the means. To the ends, rather than changing our business to it.
Correct. Because you don't want to do that. It would never work that way. Never. Yeah, which is
thank you so much. It makes sense.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. Any others? Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask, probably better verbal, so I can see the chat.
I can see another question from Zhao Wang. Does DevOps need to do its own penetration testing, or are there pen testers still needed?
Yes, pen testers still needed. You don't want someone who's developing the code to be pen testing. You don't want that. No, very bad. The way we using our example, we actually have an external team. They have no idea what we've built, and they come black hat type skill set, and they come after it. They come through the firewall, blah blah. They try to break through everything. So no, you do not want that. You don't want someone who's been involved in building it. That's not penetration testing, and penetration testing still needs to stand in its own right, in my view, because it almost serves as a check and balance of what has been built. You need to see where we have a pen tester or pen testing team arguing with the development team. I just find it very amusing, because it was like, oh, you did this, and I'm thinking, I've seen that, and I'm thinking, well, okay. Yeah, I find it very amusing, because I'm saying here, when I'm watching all of them talking about it, that's what I'm saying here. Like, because obviously developers take it personally. Well, yeah, I mean, you build something, as I'm saying, somebody breaks in and injects something in code and goes and rewrites something on the table. Like, what? Sorry, what? What did you just do? So what? So developers take it personally, but it serves as a check to make sure that when you're writing that, you should follow those guidelines and make sure you don't write it in that manner. So it does work. So I would argue that penetration testing stands in its own right.
I guess another way of asking it is pen tester part of the DevOps team? Is something the DevOps professionals need to in their tool set?
I don't think so, no, because penetration testing is also a way of thinking. It's almost, I would argue, it's almost a slanted way of thinking, because remember, this is somebody who's trying to break into anything you build. He's trying to find flaws. You see what I'm saying? So his thinking is a bit different. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, in the methodology, the approach, in the framework, in the thinking, it's different. So I would say no. I would say that is an area that, and I've never seen that. It's always, even in large organizations, they actually bring in external pen testers. We use an external company for our pen testing as well, even though they're more like our team, because we use them a lot. They're more like our team, and the CEO of the company is somebody who I've worked with in the past. So yeah, so I think that's always something that you do outside of that DevOps cycle, in my view.
Thanks. There's a question from Michael. So you mentioned about finding your passion, and it's I think I do agree, it's a very exciting age for IT with all the new innovations. I think the question is more around for well, if I rephrase it incorrectly, Michael, feel free to unmute yourself. I guess the question is more around how university students they prepare for your future career, how they have this industry experience, and you know, at university we do introduce cutting edge technology, but in my opinion, that wouldn't be sufficient for their
Of course, and that's not what it's meant to do. Yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
So, how would you recommend university students prepare themselves for the workforce?
Okay, I like that question a lot, and one of my people in this group would like this question a lot. I know Zach is somewhere smiling. The reason why I like this question a lot is because this is something that I've had a lot of conversation with him about, and probably what drove this lecture, doing this as well, and what drives some of the mentoring that I do. So one of the areas, and I alluded to this earlier on, if you want industry experience in an area, you're not going to get it from a university. The university teaches you enough for you to want to know more. But certainly that's what it did for me. Want to know more, so you go out and look for more. And how do you go and look for more? You look for more by doing work placements, by engaging the industry where you can, by getting involved in internship programs. And Griffith University has quite a few. Obviously, as I mentioned, I've been a mentor on Griffith University since 2015. I have quite a few. By getting involved, but doing it and then teaching yourself and learning by yourself, looking for every opportunity. Sometimes it might be unpaid. And I stress this and I say this again. So I know we all have bills. We had bills 15 years ago, 20 years ago, bills that there's never been a world where there was no bills. I wish there was, but I think there ever has, and there never will be. So bills is a matter of fact, a matter of our life, the way we live in our society today. Bills will always be there. But at the same time, if you want to have the knowledge, you got to go to where the knowledge is. You need to look for every opportunity to go to where the knowledge is. It is the attachments, it's in the internship, it's the mentorship, it is seeking. And sometimes you need to seek out. You'll be surprised. I went to Battle Bridge myself. They didn't advertise. I walked one day, I walked past Battle Bridge, and I said, "What do you do here?" They said, "We're building a database on ecosystems, eco factors." I said, "Can I volunteer?" He said, "What areas are you in?" I said, "I'm looking." I said, "We have a Microsoft database." I volunteered, used it to start learning 8 months, to be learning Microsoft Access. That's what I did. Now, I know the days are different. And frankly, as I'm saying, I had my debts, my student loan, all that stuff, and blah, 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 that we all have. It's never going to go away. But the question is, if you do that industry placement, or you do something which you engage in industry, what it does is it opens up your eyes. You watch other people and you see this thing, the way it works in real life. Then it helps you make a decision as to what area you want to go to. Where is your passion? There are different areas. There's a whole world out there, which is what we try to describe here. There's all that. I probably covered 90% of it. There's probably more. There's a whole world out there, and there are new emerging ones on a day-to-day basis. every week, every day coming up. You have your autonomous vehicles. Elon Musk keep on pushing the envelope, and people like him. There's so much. There's biotech as well. We haven't talked about biotech as well, which is an area in its own right. There's so much in there that finding your passion, in my view, but the only way you can find a passion, because if you don't, then you say, "Oh, I want to be a cybersecurity consultant," because and then you become a cyber, you're doing governance. Now, much as I don't mind governance, but when I don't see how many cyber criminals attacking you with governance. I've never seen anybody attack anybody with paperwork. Yeah, they attack you with skills and technique. So you defend with skills and technique. So there's only so much governance you're gonna do. There's only so much governance, and I understand governance, but there's only so much you're gonna do. You need the raw skills. We need the raw skills. Understand it, have people will learn it, will understand it, and use it to attack back for cybersecurity. You say, "Oh, I'm going to do cybersecurity. Oh, I'm going to do AI." Today is the buzzwords are cybersecurity and AI. Now, some of us have certainly been working on projects on AI cybersecurity for over 15 years. Yeah, but they were not buzzwords then. They were not buzzwords then, but today they're buzzwords. So the idea is you need to get the industry, in my view, to get that exposure that allows you to develop, to say, "Oh, I really like that." It could be system design, business analysis. Oh, I like moving around the AWS. I'm going to be an AWS expert. I'm going to be an Amazon Web Services expert. There's opportunity in all there. There's the identification. The area is so wide, and that's why when I'm mentoring, I mean, someone says to me, "Oh, I want to be here," and I think one of my mentees is here. First session I have, my questions are, I want to know where you're coming from, where you're going with this. And I do that on purpose because I want to understand what the thinking is behind where you're going with this. I want to see a logical pathway from where you're going with this. Because if you don't, I want to let you know that you may be making a mistake. And the first time you see a challenge, you're going to run away from that area. Because passion is what helps you overcome challenges, because you're going to find them. It is not going to be a walk in the park. There's no area as a walk in the park. It doesn't matter. Whether it is today or tomorrow, it's never going to be a walk in the park. So my message there is engaging with the industry in whatever form you can. That's my message.
Thanks. Michael, does that answer your question? Or if any other student have similar questions, feel free to unmute and ask. So there's a follow-up question from Michael. What happens if you don't know your passion yet?
Oh, I love that question. Well, this is the problem. We get to the point where we do not know our passion. So we continue to explore, just like in life, we continue to explore. It's a continuous, you continue to evolve and explore and see, "Oh, do I like that?" But exposing you to the industry and say, "Oh, is that how it works?" does help to find it. And I'm not suggesting it is a silver bullet that you could go into the industry depending on where you go into as well and what you see. I mean, if you go in and you're making coffee and you don't see what actually happens in that commercial environment, then maybe you're not going to find the passion. But if you go in, and you get the opportunity to actually look through the hood of the car, the engine of the car, and say, "Oh, that's how it goes together." CICD is a good one. I had a mentee from Griffith, Bryce, some years ago. He did mechanical engineering. He went to work for CICD. It was very revealing for him. He got involved in building some prototype robots in industry. He loved doing that. It helped him with his passion. Bryce is in London today. He works for Tanda. I don't know if you know Tanda. He was one of the founders of Tanda. Tanda is that big, payroll, they do time management systems. You see this thing in Brisbane there near the Marriott Hotel. You see that big building there. It says Tanda. It was one of the early founders of the organization. Shortly after, he actually worked for my company for a few months, and that was more of a placement. And then eventually they got it. He's now in London and runs a company. But he found his passion by going to CSIRO, and that's where he moved on from there. He did mechanical engineering, but he ended up in software engineering, more in software engineering, in some capacity or the other. So I hear you. It's hard to find a passion, but the more you expose yourself, the more you look for opportunities to expose yourself, and you can't always wait for them to come to you. You need to seek out opportunities for yourself. It could be somebody you talk to. The other day I was talking to, I was at the the event a couple of weeks ago, a Griffith University event as well for mentees meet and greet type of event. These two girls walked up to me, and we started chatting, and then I think one of them is doing a master's, the other one's doing a first degree in computer science, and I believe they might be in this this thing as well. They might be here as well. Anyway, and we chatted for a while, and I said, well, hang on, and we had conversations, and I realized that they still had more questions, so I said, okay, let's have a conversation further, which we did. And I said to them, and we had another call. I said to them, well, have you even told? I said, who's your mentor? Who's the official Griffith University mentor assigned to you? Oh, he's this person. Is this person? I said, you told this person that you would like an internship? No. Hang on. You have a mentor who is assigned to you, who you've been working with, you've been discussing with them. Are you not opening your mouth to ask the person, well, hang on, can I come into your office for 2 days a week or 3 days a week? Can I come and see how this actually works? So I get a better understanding. They said, no. I said, you better go back and do that. Now, sometimes you need to seek it out. Some structures, Griffith University is actually one of the best universities at building that engagement. I would argue and stand by my point. And Zach will love this one. I stand by my point. Griffith University is the most engaging university when it comes to industry in the whole of Queensland. Before UQ or any of those universities. I'm speaking from experience. I've done this enough times to know. So that's a plus for them. And that's a plus for university. So you're in a university that engages the industry more than any of the universities in this state. So that's a plus. Seek out and find opportunities. That's how you find your passion. Because if you don't know what you know, how are you going to know what you're going to like? That's the problem. And unfortunately, the university can't give that to you. So you have to seek other avenues to do that.
Thanks. Maybe we change to another question because of time. There is a question about how do you see AI changing software development?
Ooh. So is this changing software development itself, or AI built software, or software that has AI built into it? Which one are you talking about? Is it the process of building?
David, please feel free to unmute and ask.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
I'm more talking about the process of building software itself. I just see that there's a lot of AI that can actually produce code these days, and I don't think it's going to be a long time before we have AI that can actually build complex coding or solve complex issues using code. I just want to know where you see the industry heading with that.
Okay, that's a good question. And I'm a bit of a cynic, as you probably would have picked up on with some of this technology. I guess having been around technology most of my life, you become a bit cynical with some of these things as well, which is one of the reasons why when I go to a restaurant and they tell me, do the QR code thing, I say, sorry, can I have a paper, this thing? I do not want to lose the experience of me standing with a waiter and looking through that menu and saying, oh, okay, what's that steak like? If I had it well done and I had it with this, what would it taste like? I mean, have you had it? It's like, I want to be able to have that interaction. I do not want to rely on QR code to do that. But that's just me, and that's what I do. Okay, so digging into your question, now I have seen a lot. There's AI that produces code now, and there's AI that produces even reports, contracts, engagements. I mean, one of my people did one the other day. I had to write most of it because I didn't agree with what ChatGPT was saying on it. It's language, and language sometimes out of it pours personality. What you're trying to say, ChatGPT is not going to give you that. In terms of code, and again, we're referring to things like ChatGPT, obviously, and writing code. Now, I have not delved into the idea of ChatGPT producing code, and none of my developers have. I have asked those questions. None of them has, and we do a lot of code review. where we can spot if somebody has. Now, I'm not suggesting that somebody shouldn't, as long as it works perfectly. But I'm cynical, a bit cynical. I think that using it as an aid, perhaps to problem solve when you're stuck, yes. But to say that we're going to have AI writing application end to end, I have my misgivings about that and the accuracy of the application. But that's just my view.
Yeah, fully agree. Actually, from AI research background, we can see AI reaches its next sort of bottleneck where a breakthrough is needed when
Yep.
We have this level of trustworthy AI
Yep.
where we can actually trust what it produced to us.
Correct. Correct.
So I've personally tried a Copilot. You can coding and
Yep.
but basically you need to know what it produced. So it only, as Valentine said, it's only an aid for experts. So only
Correct.
if you know what you're trying to do, and
Correct.
only if you know what the outcome, the quality, if you can assess the quality of the outcome
Absolutely.
produced by AI, you can use it. Otherwise, you can't really use AI as to replace a programmer yet. I would say.
I concur.
It needs a
Yep.
next breakthrough in AI research to make that happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. As certainly not as it is today. I agree. Yep.
A question related to AI is about policy around AI development. I think AI-based robots. So would that be a concern?
Yes. Well, it's funny because okay, I'll tell a story about this one. Something happened. Somebody told me a story yesterday. So a major accident almost happened yesterday. So a friend of mine called me and was telling me the story in the morning. Drives one of these Mercedes-Benz cars. You know, these ones that these newer ones that have all kinds of intelligence in it. Intelligence to know that if you drive too close to the car in front of you, the seatbelt goes, "Oh, I'm going to hold you back." It does the automatic braking. So something happened yesterday. Brand new car, probably 2 months old, and he got to a traffic light. When he got to a traffic light, he was driving and trying to get through the traffic light at the normal speed. So you're doing your 60. This was a 60 road. Normal speed, 60 road, going to traffic light. For some reason, 3 cars in front of him. The first car stopped abruptly. So you know when the lights go green and everyone's driving past, it's something we're trying to get past quickly. So it doesn't catch us in the red. The first car stopped right abruptly. Nobody knows why it stopped. Now, the Mercedes-Benz decides, makes a calculation. Now listen to this. This was a scary one. The Benz makes a calculation that it should abruptly, the automatic braking system kicks in, and it stops the car abruptly. Now, he tells me, and this person did drive for over 25 years, he tells me that he would have driven. Yes, there was a momentary stop at those lights. You know, there are circumstances where you're driving where stopping is not a good idea because of the cars behind you. Now, whatever technology in that car, which some of it is intelligence related, did not make the calculation that the car behind did not see what was going on, and he almost got sideswiped by a truck. He lost control of that car because the intelligence took over that car, stopped it abruptly, and refused to move that car. Now, I heard that story yesterday morning, and I started laughing because this is exactly the kind of example. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's kind of example of what I'm saying. Now, I'll answer your question. AI is as effective as what you train it to do, and as effective as how much it's able to learn. Data is core to its learning. Now, and your algorithms, obviously. However, there are circumstances where, and we used the iRobot example already. Yep, there are circumstances where it is very clear from what he explained to me, he would have moved that car and got in. AI did a calculation that the distance between the car and the next car, he had to stop that car and took control. And I'm not even suggesting that it warned him. If it warned him, that's a different story. I made one of those loud noises. Oh, blah, 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 blah. You're too close to the car, or blah, blah, blah. It stopped the car. It took action and stopped the car. That is scary in my view. So let's go back to policy. Now, do I think the biggest challenge we're going to have as a society is to effectively, AI technology is advancing in a geometric progression, as all of information technology always advances in. It is geometric. Yeah, it is so fast paced. However, governance, policy, and understanding and triggering some of that thinking are along the lines of how much of it are we using? If we allow a car to take that decision, like we did in this case, how far are we going to go with it? What is the policy to guide how far we go with it? And how do we endure that safety? So my answer is, unfortunately, we don't have that in place. Obviously, AI advancement is way, way ahead of policy and framework, understanding of it to regulate it, to framework it, for lack of a better word. But it needs to happen. There is a need for it to happen, is my view.
Thanks. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute and ask. This is your opportunity to get suggestions, opinion from industry expert with over 20 years of experience. So, yeah, and that's a good opportunity to practice actually talking to someone coming from industry. You will have to talk to people in the industry one day for you.
Absolutely. Communication, communication, and communication, and communication. For the 4 C's, I call it. You get that right, that's the beginning of the game. You're getting it right to be an expert. Communication and communication is key. So please feel free to.
Last call. Any questions? Maybe I ask a question, Valentine, before we conclude. I see you mentioned earlier on your experience with Centrica.
Yep.
And you mentioned about the microservice. I think it's very important for students to have a big picture of how DevOps technology fits into the big picture, right? So maybe you can, if you like, talk about how microservice would change the way how it was done.
So traditionally, microservices allows you to literally build your application into services and API calls, for lack of a more definitive method. In the past, you built applications, and like I mentioned at the beginning, one of the applications I was involved with years ago, written in COBOL, you did not. I mean, it was crazy, absolutely crazy. Looking at the code for this application. It was built in a Power Builder, COBOL, and I'm trying to remember that Visual Basic was in there, and a few other things that were in there. It was Oracle as well. Oracle 6 at the time, 6 or 7i at the time. So traditional methods built applications in a manner, I would say, yes, there were functions, there were functions and procedures that were called, but not in the same manner. With APIs, you compartmentalize your development, and it also allows you to exchange data better. We use API calls across everything that we build. It allows us to exchange data in a manner. Having said that, API is also a vulnerability area, which is why we when we do our pen testing, we attack it quite extensively as well to make sure that that's not an area of vulnerability. So traditionally, you build your procedures, your functions. It is one application. When anything goes wrong, you have to troubleshoot the whole application. With API calls and microservices, if something goes wrong, you isolate it from a particular call, a particular API, and it's easier to fix. Also, in the way you deploy and build applications, it's faster because you're building via API calls, and it's almost it follows the object-oriented methodology, which is obviously where we are now, because if like you can liken some of those things to objects as well, and it's easier as well to build child objects, for lack of a better word, when you build via microservices. Easier to define other methods as well, are ways to use that object. So microservices obviously has driven the level of, I don't think without microservices, a lot of the applications you see today, because the effort involved and the timeline involved in building application the way that we did when I was in Centrica, cost a lot of money, a lot of people, teams of hundreds. I mean, the team that built all this system were over 500 people involved in this. I mean, like ridiculous. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. We built the application we built for the oil and gas services company was quite a large project managed, customized for oil and gas with a very elaborate document management workflow. We couldn't have built them. I mean, roughly the team, if you exclude the testing team, was not more than 10 people involved in it. You could pull that stunt years ago. I mean, it just wouldn't have worked in terms of what you need to do that. So yeah, so that's the major difference I see, and that's driving the industry, and that's what obviously a lot of the applications you use today are driven off microservices and the way that those calls are made as well.
Thanks. Hopefully now students can see a more bigger picture of why we're learning containers and Dockers and so on. That's very useful and very interesting, inspiring talk and discussions. Again, we have 2 more questions in the chat.
Yep.
So the first question is, do you see any instances where communication has been prioritized over expertise in the industry?
Yes, I have. Yes, because yes, quite a bit, and I would even say within our organization we do that quite a bit. I am willing to take on somebody. So 2 people. One has 40% background, another person has 25% background. But the person who has 25% background is a better communicator. I take the person with 25% background any day, anytime. Because I know that a person with 25 background will tell me what they need, and I'll give them what they need, and will give them room to grow. And they will surpass the person who has 45% if he doesn't have the same. So communication is the biggest. I almost recruited a developer about a month ago. He's very good at what he does. Very, very good at what he does. Very bad communicator. Very, very bad communicator. He was doing work that was exemplary. He could not tell anybody what he's doing. I was on the verge of ending it. We had already started removing his access to repos. I was on the verge of ending it. He called me and he said, but I can do this. And I backed down. I would argue that he's something close to a genius, but I almost lost that. But that's because he couldn't communicate. So now we've changed. Now that I know he can't communicate, I've changed all of that. I extract that information from him on a daily basis as I need to. So now I understand he's not a good communicator. So now I've found ways to make him a better communicator. But it was new, and we didn't understand this at the time. So communication is huge. Big, huge. Yes, I would prioritize communication over, especially if the skill imbalance, obviously, the skill imbalance is as much as 20% or that kind of level. Yes, I would take someone who's a better communicator. Very key, very important, I think.
Thank you. And we try to stress on soft skills in all of our ICT courses, encouraging students to have a bit of team projects so they can practice communicating to one another. So that's what needed in the industry. That's
absolutely
employers value very much.
Yep.
Because of time, we can only take the one final question, and this is a interesting one. If you could do it all over again, would you follow the same path and get involved in IT?
Yes, I enjoy what I do. I wake up in the morning and I'm saying, hey, what's the next one? In fact, it's become, I think some of my people are now scared. are now scared of some of things I come up with. I think now I would do it over and over again. There were a lot of challenges on the way I had to overcome. But the passion of where I wanted to get to. And that's why I emphasize on the passion, because you are going to meet things that will put you off. It's that simple. You're going to meet times when you're going to be very, very put off. Say, why should I do this? There are times you're not going to have the money. Yes. Even the whole thing about technology. I mean, I remember a story. One of the roles that I did, I think after my first job. After my after my I think my first consulting piece, and it was such a jump on what I earned. And the funny thing is that when I started this thing, it was like I walked in, they said, oh, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, I'll do this, blah, blah. And I said, okay. And I went to work. And I never really sat down to think about how much it was going to. Then after 1 week, and after about 2 weeks, I got paid. And the money is in there with like 5 or 6, 7 times what I had earned in the past. So like, it was like half my income in 6 months was paid in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Or a month. I can't remember what date exactly. Maybe a month. I can't remember exactly, but I know it was something like 6 or 7 months of pay in 1 month. And I started thinking to myself, what the? So I got a bit scared. So I called a friend of mine who's an accountant. And I started to, I said, oh, who eventually was my accountant anyway. And he said to me, so I started, I said, oh, I've got paid this money. And like, he says, oh, I said, I don't know. It looks pretty big. I don't know what to do with it. This is still a joke till date. The guy says to me, so, so Val, I have an idea for you. I said, you know what? I think you should go to the bank. When you get to the bank, withdraw all the money, put it in a nice envelope, seal it, come to my office and drop it off for me. So moral of that story is that's how indifferent I was to how much I was going to earn. I was earning at the time because the passion was in the forefront. And I know times have changed. It might be harder to do it that way today, but I'm saying that where possible and as much as possible, your passion driving you is key because it allows you to overcome this challenge. It allows you to do something that you may end up doing the rest of your life. It's best to do something you want to do the rest of your life that you're passionate about and you're earning money from, in my view, rather than going by, oh, okay, it is this one today, is that one today. The first sign of a challenge there, you don't dig in. And that's the point I was trying to make.
Thank you, Valentine. Big thank you for joining us today for the very inspiring and motivating talk.
Thank you.
I can see comments in the chat. Students learned a lot and they want to also express their thanks.
Okay, very good. Thanks everyone. Thanks for having me. And like I said, this is what I think we should be doing. It is passing that knowledge across. There's so much things we need to fix in our society, and the more warriors we have trained to deal with it, we don't know what's coming. And we had COVID 2 years ago. We don't know what else there's going to be thrown at us. So we need more people and more experts in the area. And I'm willing to give my little bit, the little bit that I know. I'm happy. I've been doing that for years, and I'll continue to do that as best I can.
And be aware of the industry events and Griffith has also a mentorship program.
Yes.
And I believe Valentine is part of it. So I think you will have a queue of students lining up for you.
Oh yeah, that's fine. And we Zach is here, and myself and Zach work very well together, fit it all in, and sometimes the juggling act on my calendar, but yeah, Zach helps quite a bit with that. But that's all good.
Oh, thanks. I think
Cheers.
we are already
very good.
over time. I think it's very valuable.
Very
session.
good. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
everyone.
again.
Cheers. All right. Okay.
See you next
Bye-bye.
time.
Okay. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.